Imagine a battlefield where the tanks are made of rubber, the sounds of war are played from giant speakers, and the soldiers are actually artists from New York. This was the Ghost Army, a top-secret US unit in World War II that never fired a single bullet, yet managed to save over 15,000 lives. For 50 years, their incredible story was a state secret. Today, we are revealing how a group of painters and actors defeated Hitler with the world's most dangerous lie. What if I told you that one of the most successful US units in World War II never fired a single bullet? While millions of soldiers were charging into battle with rifles and grenades, a secret group of 1,100 men was fighting the Nazis with nothing but paintbrushes, inflatable rubber, and giant speakers. This wasn't a combat unit in the traditional sense. It was a traveling roadshow of deception designed to trick Hitler's finest generals into fighting ghosts. The US Army didn't look for career soldiers for this mission. Instead, they scoured art schools and advertising agencies across America. They recruited painters, architects, actors, and sound engineers. These creative minds were brought together to form the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. Their weapon wasn't firepower, it was imagination. Their goal was to create a tactical deception so realistic that the German High Command would bet their entire strategy on a lie. The first layer of their trickery was visual. The Ghost Army used massive inflatable tanks, trucks, and airplanes made of rubber. From a distance or from a reconnaissance plane, these decoys looked identical to the real thing. To make it even more convincing, the men would use bulldozers to create fake tank tracks in the mud leading up to the rubber vehicles. They even painted fake bumper markings to mimic actual elite divisions that were miles away. Visuals alone weren't enough to fool the enemy at night. That's where the sound engineers came in. They used massive theater speakers mounted on half-tracks that could be heard up to 15 miles away. They played recorded sounds of tanks moving, soldiers swearing, and bridges being built. By mixing these soundtracks, they could make the Germans believe an entire armored division was moving through the woods under the cover of darkness, causing the enemy to panic. The third layer was spoof radio. The unit's radio operators were experts at mimicking the unique fist or typing style of operators from other units. They would broadcast fake messages about troop movements and supply drops, knowing the Germans were listening. By creating this fake radio traffic, they built a digital ghost of an army that existed only in the ears of Nazi intelligence. It was a symphony of misinformation that clouded the enemy's judgment. The Ghost Army even used atmosphere to sell the lie. Soldiers would go into local French or Belgian cafes wearing the patches of famous units. They would sit and talk loudly about their upcoming mission, knowing that German spies were likely listening. They would even drive trucks and loops, with just 2 men in the back to make it look like a convoy full of soldiers. They were essentially performing a high-stakes play where the stage was the entire European front. One of their first major successes was in Brittany. The Ghost Army was tasked with making the Germans believe a massive American force was surrounding the city of Brest. They set up their inflatable decoys and blasted their soundtracks for nights on end. The deception was so effective that the German garrison remained hunkered down, waiting for an attack that never came, while the real American forces were actually miles away, capturing other critical strategic objectives. Their most dangerous mission happened during the crossing of the Rhine River. The Ghost Army was ordered to draw German fire away from the real crossing point. They set up hundreds of inflatable tanks and played the sounds of a massive assembly. The Germans fell for it completely, repositioning their artillery and troops to face the ghosts. Meanwhile, the real Ninth Army crossed the river miles away with minimal resistance. Their trickery had turned the tide of the invasion. Being a ghost was terrifyingly dangerous. These men were often operating just a few miles from the front lines with no real weapons to defend themselves. If the Germans had realized the tanks were made of rubber, the unit would have been wiped out in minutes. They had to be perfect every single time. One mistake, one deflated tank, or one wrong radio signal could have revealed the entire secret and led to a massacre of both the actors and the real troops. When the war ended, the men of the Ghost Army were sworn to absolute secrecy. Their files were classified, and they weren't allowed to tell their wives or families what they had actually done in Europe. For over 40 years, the official record stated they were just a regular supply unit. The world had no idea that a group of artists had saved thousands of lives. Their heroism remained a shadow, much like the army they had created during the heat of battle. The Ghost Army was finally declassified in 1996. Only then did the world learn that famous artists like Bill Blass and Ellsworth Kelly were among those who used their talents to win the war. Their legacy proved that creativity can be just as powerful as gunpowder. They didn't just paint pictures. They painted a false reality that confused the greatest military machine of the time. They proved that in war, the mind is often the most lethal weapon of all. In 2022, the surviving members of the Ghost Army were finally awarded the Congressional Gold Medal, the highest civilian honor in the United States. It was a long overdue recognition for the 1,100 men who saved an estimated 15,000 American lives. Today, their story serves as a reminder that sometimes the most important battles are won not by those who fight the hardest, but by those who can dream up the most convincing lie.